Understanding becomes a reality, Americans and Russians alike will see that they are similar in many respects and that each belongs to the same human race. When an overflowing stream of common feeling underlies the speech and actions of all people, the hostility of governments will become absurd. Although this is not a question of the relations between the Soviet Union and the United States, it is certain that the so-called ping-pong diplomacy and previous private exchanges greatly facilitated the realization of Richard Nixon's trip to Peking in 1972. Man cannot be completely free from prejudice. Increasing contact and interchange do not always lead to the promotion of goodwill. Nevertheless, disputes between peoples who are familiar with each other certainly cause less unnecessary fear and suspicion. Lack of mutual understanding, by creating an endless succession of hatred and fear, eventually leads to destructive consequences. To build mutual understanding as a sound foundation for international relations is the first prerequisite for lasting world peace.
So this really is leading now to Sensei to talk about the movement for culture, education, and peace. This establishment through bringing people together in all sorts of different fields of society and interchanging them so that they can find that common ground and then from there develop understanding, and through that trust. And through trust, peace, just like our old slogan says. I think there is no other way. I personally believe that in the end it has to get down to the grassroots, the common, ordinary people. Because politicians can no longer resist the will of the people if it is strong and if it is voiced not in a violent way, because that doesn't justify the end, but through dialogue again, talk between peoples. So we've seen the same thing in a smaller scale, of course, in this country, in the outbreaks of rioting in Birmingham or in Brixton. In the end, the fuel for that is often an inability for understanding between one ethnic group and another, or between one group and their local authority, or whatever it may be. So this business of talk, dialogue, is so crucially important, isn't it? Politicians do have to listen to the voice of the people. I think we've seen this more and more clearly. They have to. Even in a country which is not democratic, in the end, it's the voice of the people that will win. South Africa is not democratic, has a framework of democracy, but it doesn't use it. In the end, the voice of the people is what will win there. But the worry is, of course, that if human beings are obstinate and blind and filled with pride or arrogance, then it'll take them that much longer to listen. What helps us to listen, above all, of course, is religion, and particularly the religion that can actually bring about that change. We see it on our own doorstep in Ireland. I'm hoping now there are signs that the people are really voicing their views. My last 2 visits of Ireland, on the telly and so on, I found people were voicing their views that this cannot go on. Quite ordinary people in a chat show and that sort of thing. You didn't hear that 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. It's more apparent now. The people are beginning to say this has got to stop. And if they go on saying that, in the end, it definitely will stop. Because the governments will start to take action, and the voice of the people will swamp those evil forces which are working to maintain trouble in Ireland for their own gain. Because in the end, Ireland, though at the base of it, the excuse for it is religion, but it's being exploited, as is always the case, by evil people who are using it for their own profit, in terms of the protection rackets and so on that exist throughout, for example, Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland. They stir up trouble for their own ends often. So it's so complicated, it's true, but on the other hand, it is not complicated for the human beings involved to say, enough of this. It's got to stop, and to go on and on saying it until the politicians realize they've got to do something. And it gives the politicians the courage then to do it. So towards the end now, Sensei really begins to directly challenge, or you could say, use the principle of shoju on Toynbee. So if we could read John 242, page 242.
Because the world is figuratively shrinking with unprecedented rapidity, thanks to modern means of communication and transportation, it is no longer difficult to promote mutual understanding. Strengthening of intimate relations between governments may not be immediately feasible, but this is no cause for despair, because increased interchange among peoples is more effective in bringing about peace than intimacy on governmental levels. Do you agree with me on this point? Do you believe a peaceful settlement of the problems between the two blocks is feasible? If you believe it is, on what grounds is your belief based, and in what way do you think the solution will be realized?
And then Toynbee goes on in reply.
I see two grounds for hope. First, the annihilation of distance by modern technology has increased the volume of both business and tourist travel, and with the volume of information about foreign countries that can be obtained without travel by means of radio and television, there has been an increase in the realization that we are all members of one human family, and that, as such, we have common interests and problems. And second, huge international technological projects inspire a sense of unity among peoples. The exploration of outer space is, in one aspect, an expression of the rivalry and competition between the Soviet Union and the United States. Yet, at the same time, the Russians, the Americans, and the rest of mankind feel that this is a common human enterprise. The Soviet Union and the United States governments congratulate each other on successes and condole with each other on failures.
And following that, Sensei then sums up Toynbee's views. I just jotted them down here. Firstly, so far as Asia is concerned, China must, or is likely to play the leading role. Secondly, the Chinese principles of knowing how to maintain stable government over enormous populations can be a very valuable experience for the future. Thirdly, Toynbee thinks that this idea of a sort of benevolent dictatorship may be necessary. And fourthly, the spiritual aspect is essential to achieve spiritual unity. And Sensei follows that by flatly rejecting that third point, that a dictatorship may be necessary. And he re-emphasizes the example of the EEC as a model for the future. The importance, in other words, of Europe once again. And then Sensei says, if you look at page 244, top of the page,
to follow the path of China may be effective in overcoming short-range dangers, but it may also lead to peril. The European formula will require long, patient efforts, but I see in it much less risk of danger. The unification of Japan, effected by Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, was based on an ancient tradition of national oneness. In the case of the Greek Federation of the 5th century BC, too, all of the participants were Hellenes with a sense of being part of a large group. The Italians in the 19th century had recollections of the Roman Empire to inspire them to unite. In other words, in all these cases, force was merely the means. The motivating factor in the unification was a feeling of close relationship among the people. It may well be that, in these cases, force was the lesser evil, but today it is an absolute evil. The first thing we must concern ourselves with in connection with global unification of the modern world is the development of a feeling of spiritual oneness for all mankind. Once this feeling has been established, concrete methods for unification will emerge automatically.
So I think this gives one a clue to Sensei's thinking, or the principles behind the movement of culture, education, and peace. So he is specifically opening the campaign, if you like, in the field, in certain fields. He selected the academic field through the Institute of Oriental Philosophy, and through Soka University, and indeed, for that matter, the Soka schools in Japan. And then he selected the field of visual arts in terms of the work of the Fuji Art Museum in promoting exchange through cultural exchange, through exchanging treasures of art across the world. And then he's also selected, of course, the live arts in terms of both Ming'an and also, of course, on a smaller scale by what we can do in visual arts, in the academic field, we meaning NSUK, to open up new frontiers in terms of people, getting to know more and more people in those particular fields of society. So, of course, the other one is education amongst teachers, very fundamental to the whole world in the future. But that is not the end of it, of course. Through the example of what can be achieved in those particular fields, so it can lead to interchange in a myriad other fields of human activity. It's beginning to come about amongst doctors and lawyers and so on. It can spread in every direction because there is common ground. There is common ground between a doctor in Peru or in Japan and a doctor in Germany or England, isn't there? Through their profession in that case. There is common ground always in people who are doing similar sorts of work, wherever it may be in the world. So the more you can establish relationships which are based at the beginning on some form of common ground, then inevitably it will expand outwards. And the trust established based on that common ground can lead to trust in matters that so far in history human beings have mistrusted each other. So we're in at it at the very beginning, but it's something that can expand outwards through the live arts also, through visual arts, through all sorts of fields of activity, to every corner of the world. In other words, the human beings of the world can unite to an increasing degree, step by step, through these threads of human understanding. And that Sensei believes, and I believe, is the only way in the end, because politicians will never achieve peace that is lasting on their own. And of course, fundamental, deep below that, is the human revolution. It's the power of people who are doing their human revolution and practicing to the Gohonzon, which can maintain that relentless force, which can bring about the development of such a movement. Of course, people in those interchanges may not practice for reasons of their karma or whatever. But the power of the development of it must come from people who have incredible life force, who are willing to go at it day after day after day in terms of their own individual human revolution and spreading, that influence around them. That's what this movement is all about, isn't it? So on page 244, we've done that one. 245, John.
This is President Ikeda. Today, Christianity, Islam, Confucianism, and Taoism have fallen into a powerless state, and we face the question of finding a new religion to unite all the peoples of the world. Of course, a religion must not be enforced upon people. Unless it is supported by a spontaneous human search for truth and the fervour of faith, it is meaningless. The religion required for world unity must appear reasonable to man. Modern man's reasoning faculty forbids illogical doctrines. Such doctrines might appeal to a small group of people because of their very illogicality, but the majority will not believe in them. If the majority will not follow, no religion can hope to become the dominant trend of its time. Do you feel that a worldwide religion is necessary? If you do, what conditions must it satisfy?
Okay, so you can see how he's gradually getting Toynbee to face this matter of religion and its place in the future. Toynbee tends to cling on to his belief that in the end, force or discipline is going to have to be used because he can't believe that such a religion can exist. But he does acknowledge, and I quote what he says, that a widespread change of heart through a revolution on the religious plane is not impossible, and this might save the situation. Gradually, he's beginning to see the point. And then, Sensei, if you read again, John, page 2, no, sorry, so we can give Toynbee's closing words in those last 2 paragraphs on page 246.
The key precept of religion is that self-mastery is man's first task. We must master our greed and our pride. These two fatal human failings have perhaps never been so rife as they are in the modern age, when man has turned the tables on his natural environment as a result of his progress in technology. Man's recent victory over nature has inflated his pride and, at the same time, has increased his power to indulge his greed. Yet the achievements of science and technology, of which modern man is so proud, have solved some of man's old problems only at the cost of creating new ones. In the so-called developed countries, the price of material enrichment has been the pollution of the natural environment and a social conflict over the division of this newly made wealth among the participants in the production of it. The present sequel to the Industrial Revolution is demonstrating that, in spite of his scientific and technological prowess, modern man, like primitive man, is not master of the situation in which he finds himself. He has failed to master it because he has failed to master himself. Self-mastery is the only means of avoiding self-frustration. This truth was proclaimed by the traditional religions. I believe it will be proclaimed by any serious future religion. To master oneself is the essence of religion as I see it, and I think a future religion that preaches this traditional religious precept will win the allegiance of mankind, because this precept is, I believe, the only effective response to the challenge of being human.
Rather great words by the old man at that stage, I feel. And, of course, he is saying in those words that this religion has to have the innate power to actually bring about this change. And the problem with religions in the past, of course, is that they have been weak or partial in one form or another. And as a result of that, they have been exploited and used by governments and by politicians. We see this, the use of religion as a means of maintaining control over the people in many places in history, certainly in the history of Judaism and Christianity, where the people were actually controlled by the ruling authorities and, of course, using the priests as their minions by means of fear or guilt and that sort of thing. Or in the case of Islam, the Muslims, through inciting the people to go to war, actually inciting them in the name of religion to commit violence and to dominate others. So it's not surprising that Dr. Toynbee had such a view. He's a great historian. He'd studied these religions in every part of the world and their effect. That's why he was fearful of religion at the beginning of this book. Now, alternatively, weak religions can actually bring about one part of or country following that religion to fight against the other, sometimes over religious dogma. In history, we've seen that a lot in Europe. The cause of war was an incomplete dogma or doctrine which had holes in it. So people fought over what should fill the hole. And so Toynbee, however, acknowledges in the end that religion is going to be essential, and that the human revolution, really, he's saying, is the only acceptable way, that there must be a religion that can bring about that revolution in the hearts and minds of people. And of course, it's true that in all the dialogues that President Ikeda has taken part in the end, that is the understanding which these men have agreed to. Dr. Peche, and before it's too late, Dr. Wilson, all of them see that in the end, when you get down to brass tacks, to the roots of everything, the human revolution is vital. And that without the human revolution taking place in more and more people, the peace of the world can never be established. So I feel, this section is so interesting, not only because it's a brilliant review of the state of the world, and indeed an intelligent process of thought on the way on the surface of life, gradually world peace may be a possibility, but also it's leading to the culmination of this point in terms of Sensei introducing the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin to Dr. Toynbee. And this he does in this last section of the book. I think this last section of the book is the most marvelous, brief introduction to Buddhism, to Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, that you'll find anywhere in any of the books that have ever been published, actually, in those few pages. It's beautifully done, and a wonderful example of the way Yukin Shakubuku, after all, a great scholar, nearing the end of his life, who had an unbelievable broad concept of the state of the world and was troubled about the future. So these books, however influential a person may be, can have such profound influence. And I'm really concerned that this book should be republished. I'm determined that it's one of the things that NSUK must achieve, is the republication of this book. Because, in fact, it's not dated. Maybe there are a few things which need editing, but mostly it's not dated at all, despite the years since it was actually written. And we need to get it out, properly promoted, on a wide scale of distribution. I think one can only put it down to the negative force of life, that for some extraordinary reason, this book has been less well promoted and distributed in this country than in almost any other country. Its German versions and Spanish versions and Portuguese versions and Chinese versions are all selling like hotcakes. But here, where it was actually carried out, the Oxford University Press didn't do anything about it. So we must get another, more dynamic publisher to really do something about it. And in a way, that's why, if we can get Hutchinson's, who are publishing this new book on an introduction to Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, may well be the people who will do it. I hope, but I'm sure we're going to achieve it in the next 3 or 4 years. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much indeed. Good. Let's do it. Let's try. Very much. Yes. Looks like a question from the back. Yes, 4 minutes. Very unusual for us to finish 4 minutes early.
Yeah. Self-investment involved in Europe and used in Europe. And perhaps more than anywhere else, from state of Tuesday, when the great creative potential of writing of Tuesday. My feeling is that some of the European Union is very useful to the UK. The sense that the UK is a weak place in Europe. Same time, I believe the UK has an important role to play in Europe. So do you think that we, as members of Europe, should take responsibility for supporting or even have promoting Europe rather than be?
That's a very good question. Yes, of course, there is something in what you say, because historically, we've always been separated from Europe by the English Channel. And the English Channel, of course, has played a great part in our history in terms of our defending our freedoms. And those freedoms, I might say, were unique in this part of the world. Possibly they're also strong in Scandinavia, but basically they're unique. So the Channel played its part, but now the Channel is being bridged and tunneled, and it's out of date as a barrier. And it's interesting, of course, in the evolvement of history, that at the same time, the movement to establish the EEC and the struggle for Britain, a political struggle for Britain to join the EEC was at last won, and the various sort of isolationist prejudices which existed, the fears that existed amongst people because of that history of the Channel being such an effective defense line, were gradually overcome. So in that sense, you could say that our feeling as Europeans is less obvious or weak. This is so because we're not used to thinking of ourselves as Europeans. But the greatness of Tretz is, of course, that it compels us to think as Europeans. So, in fact, so far as NSUK is concerned, first of all, the important thing is to get as many people to Tretz on courses as one can, because there, for the first time, they have to grapple with that problem. And we are all filled, of course, with prejudices and blindness in that sense. So I agree with you there. Tretz is incredibly important to the UK, and it is incredibly important that we shall send people there. I feel, as the most important thing before finally going on Pozan, I feel in a way that may not matter for several years after a person has started to practice, but the important thing is that early in their practice, they should go to Tretz, don't you? So is there anyone here who's never been to Tretz? Time you went. The Gohonza will do that for you. If you have the itch then to go, you've got no problem there.
Yes, what do you have? I've been in the residence before.
What? Maybe. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think so. That's a very good point. I agree with that. It's a matter of Ichinen, isn't it? So anyway, broadening one's view through this sort of thing can help to strengthen that Ichinen, don't you think? So yes, I do think this is a point. So far as what we can do practically, that comes back, doesn't it, to the way of Kosen Rufu. The way of Kosen Rufu is on one's own individual path. The more that we as individuals talk about the importance of Europe, the future peace of the world, the more that thought enters other people's minds and they begin to think about it. So I feel that in the end, that is the most important way to spread a feeling for the importance of Europe in the years to come. Though, of course, there could be other ways, but such as example, putting on some great festival in the future the theme of which is European unity. And certainly, I think we probably will do that one of these days. But the first step, I feel, is to make sure that we're unified. So I feel, next year, I really hope we can put on some sort of festival which is emphasizing the unity of all of us in Britain, whatever our background culturally or ethnically may be. That's first step. And then I'm sure we could follow that with some sort of a expression of European unity. Or that may be done as a first step in Europe itself, say in Paris, somewhere like that. But it should be followed up here. I agree with that, because we've got to make sure that people begin to think about it. So it's a good question, Ajay. Thank you very much. But meanwhile, it's really in the end much more powerful is what we all say in conversations and in discussion, even just by showing our concern for European unity or talking about our trip to Tretz amongst our friends. All those ways are in the end the most powerful ways. So a festival can get to quite a lot of people, but it's nothing to the number of people that can be affected when a new idea is sown in someone's head and it passes from mouth to mouth that way. Does that answer the question, Ajay? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Shall we conclude? Okay, see you in a month's time. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you. So the next session of the New Century Group is on Saturday, the 7th of May. As the young men were first this time, the young women are first that time. So the young men's session starts at 5 o'clock on Saturday, the 7th of May. If you wish to come to do Gongyo, that's at 4 o'clock at Richmond Centre. Evening Gongyo this afternoon will be at 4 o'clock. And if anyone requires reimbursement, could you please see me for your regional travel expenses, not for your London ones, at Richmond Centre, either before or after Gongyo. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Yes, the next section is session 10, and it's the first part of the end section of the book, page 249, The Nature of Things, first section in Philosophical and Religious Life, page 249. Okay, see you next month. Thank you very much.